Join in. Excited to have our executive panel here today. So, for our executive panel discussion, 2024 engagement recognition, trends and tips. All right, we are about to get started here. Welcome to everyone. My name is Matt Willis. I am the general manager, the senior VP with a company called Advantage Club. We global engagement recognition software, about 4 million users, 100 countries. We have the great honor today to support an executive discussion. And the discussion today is on 2024 employee recognition, engagement, and its trends and tips. So all things to do with culture. Couldn't be more excited about our particular panelists today. They have an extensive background in speaking, authoring subjects, influencing. So we're very excited and we'll get right into it. So with that, we're going to go ahead to our first slide. Great. Our time today. So as we introduce our speakers in just a second, we want to talk about, hey, why are you here today joining us? And the main reason is, hey, what's going on in terms of the trends as we look at Q2 2024, what's going on in the landscape? So we have some updated statistics you can take back to your individual organizations. Then we're going to go through three topics. Understanding employee needs in today's post-COVID world, engaging employees, what's working, what's not, and recognize employees, what are we seeing out in the marketplace? So with that, I want to introduce our speakers. The first is Alicia. Alicia is a keynote speaker and author, highly recognized influencer, and with a background in not only working for The Economist, but also as chief operating officer for Spark Concern. She then moved over and she's today the CEO of CultureShift, where she works with hundreds, literally, I think it's into the thousands now, of companies on workforce diversity, employee culture initiatives, and is really a thought leader. So we're very excited to have Alicia with us today. In addition, we have Christina Trampota. She's an award-winning digital executive, influencer, teacher, advisor, and speaker. Christina has a business degree from University of Texas and a master's of business from University of Chicago. She's been with a few small companies in her history, including Visa and Twitter and Facebook Meta, before becoming managing director of the Innovative Growth Scale, where she advises companies not only on transforming markets on the product and market side, but also is related to smart growth, which is building teams, building culture. So we're very excited to have them both here today. We got a 2-for-1 powerhouses to talk about these issues. So with that, we're going to move to our next slide. Okay, so what are the trends? As a backdrop for our panel discussion, hot off the press, Gallup this week, 30% of employees are engaged at work. So let me restate that. 30% of all employees in North America are engaged at work. Along with that, we're running about a third of new hires, all industries, are still looking to leave or leaving within 90 days of being hired. And we have somewhere bouncing around 50% of employees are looking for their next job. What does this mean? Well, Deloitte would say, hey, it's expensive, not only in terms of the economic hard costs, but also the soft costs. But the hard costs are 34% of annual salary every time someone is disengaged. It's what it costs the company. And if we look at our next slide, So we know those stats. We've heard these through COVID, people that are less engaged. What we're also finding is there's a disconnect. So if we're all in the room together, we say, hey, raise your hands. Are you engaging your employees? Are you getting employees involved? Absolutely. Every executive is going to say, of course we value employees. Of course we are training our leaders. We're getting them involved. But if you do the same survey with frontline employees, you've got 60 to 70% that are saying, hey, I haven't had any recognition this year. I'm not engaged. And particularly true with Gen Z and millennials, 80% plus feel excluded at work. There's good news, though, that those same categories, if you go to millennial, Gen Z, there is a greater sense of belonging expressed when colleagues are reaching out to them or when there's something put in place. So what are we facing? Hey, we're in a crisis today. And the crisis is really, hey, how do we address employee needs? How do we get people engaged? So next slide. So 3 big topics today. One is, hey, how do we get people engaged? What are employee needs? And so we're going to start with one slide, and then I'm going to turn over the panel. Next slide. Okay, this is from Josh Burson Company, and they did some extensive research. Lots of companies said, what matters most today? This is 2023. Trust, transparency, inclusion, and caring. That's top of the list. So this has evolved and accelerated post-COVID. The biggest items, and this is a busy slide, but here are the highlights. Trust in the company, mission, purpose, investment in people, inclusion, diversity, sense of belonging, and community. So today we're looking for not only do I get the paycheck, but supportive workplace, well-being and health, the leadership, career growth, trust in the company, purposeful work. So we're going to pause there, and we're going to go to our panelists and talk about what have you seen and what are you seeing regarding, hey, what companies are doing well or maybe not so well regarding finding out what employees need today. So we'll start with Alicia, and then we'll go to Christina, and then we'll do round robin.
Sounds good. I wish I could say that these statistics, shocked me, but unfortunately, this is the world that we're living in right now, where employees are feeling very disengaged. They're feeling like organizations aren't really. They're doing the bare minimum just to kind of meet the needs. Just offering a job is enough, and we're seeing that employees at organizations want more. I think where organizations are doing well, or the ones that are doing well, understand that fundamentally. They understand that their employees are their biggest asset. They create a real sense of belonging through creating psychological safety, which ties hand in hand with building trust and transparency in an organization, and understanding how those two components work together. So sharing company updates, understanding what the short and long-term goals of the organization are, and tying that back to the individual's job. Understanding how, leaders need to share and be a little bit maybe vulnerable with their staff on like how they're feeling about changes in the company, in the market, shifts that are taking place that we all do feel. So we're seeing organizations that really know how to prioritize that and create that safety, and then bring that safety in with their employees and feeling like they really do create that sense of belonging. And then organizations not seeing this as important, seeing this as a second versus a first, is where we see the, statistics like this, and whether it's engagement reports or pulse surveys, employees are just like, hey, if you're going to treat me like a paycheck, I'm going to do the exact same thing back. And so unfortunately, these stats don't surprise me.
Great. Christina?
Yes, I agree. Really aligned with so many things you mentioned there, but I would really start with trust. I think today's generations and everyone who's here in the workforce is also noticing that lack of connection that we used to see, whether you want to attribute it to the pandemic or simply the way now more and more organizations are hybrid, mixed with remote, mixed with just a mix of generations. I don't think that many workers believe in the work is life, life equals work as much as they used to in the past. And so I think you're also starting to see some increased disconnection where people want to keep, maybe it's an arm's length, maybe it's the way they divide their calendar, or maybe it's their communication style that they have, depending on the organization. And with that, I actually link it to tech. Yes, I work more in a tech-heavy setting with home base being Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. Also, they'll work with teams around the globe. And I think you really can enable a lot of those connections through that. So looking into opportunities where you can give that recognition, understand what they're looking for, as well as call them out to actually participate, show what they know, show what they love, and bring that passion out. And the last thing I would really summarize it with is time. Sometimes it's patience and being gradual with that. And I say that with a huge smile, knowing also working in some very small organizations, you only have so much time to onboard, explain, educate, and empower your team. But helping them know that they have that time and making the time for that as the manager or as the leader of the organization, that also can help enable many of those.
That's great. We have our first question today. And for our audience, you have two options with questions today for our panelists. Number one is you can use the chat, and we do have a team going through, and we will ask as many relevant questions as we can to our panelists. In the alternative, if you have a burning question that we don't get to, might be specific to your industry or size of company or business, etc., after this webinar, we will follow up, and we will follow up with a link to the profile for Alicia as well as Christina, and you can certainly meet with one of our engagement leaders for some follow-up. So with that, from the audience live, you mentioned, just reading this off, trust, technology, and time. Can you give an example of any technologies that are working for culture?
Sure. I'll share the first one that I was actually thinking of when I gave that statement. I've been in a few places that utilize Slack. I understand everyone's IT and technology is controlled differently, so maybe use a different one. But there were channels not only for what you use in your organization, ones we had for employee resource groups or interest groups. And honestly, if you have it open, which in smaller companies, they have even more flexibility, we would enable the teams to create some of their own. But the coolest function, I can't remember the name of it, but it's like a way you could get matched with someone through there, and the organization set that up. And I thought that was a lot of fun. And you saw participation from people at all levels doing that in some of these companies. And so I've seen that in larger as well as smaller ones. I think it's fun. It's kind of like a way you can have a virtual coffee with someone, because especially in globally distributed teams, it opened up doors of opportunity for people to connect and get to know each other, regardless of their location and time zone.
Great. Alicia, any tech related to any of your companies incorporated?
Yes, +1 to Christina's plug for Slack. I love Slack. It's a key tool for how I engage with my team. Also, you can now integrate clients into that as well, and so that's a great tool. I think the plugin you were talking about, Christina, was Donut, so that helps to match people, which I've used it many times myself and has been really, really helpful. I think too, from a tech perspective, I think understanding that the technology needs to be flexible and also allow people to have different entrance points during, their day. So programs also like High Five, where you could do like reviews or elements that allow you to give kudos to your team for, going above and beyond, speaking at a presentation, whatever that might be. Those small little recognitions go a long way. And so adding even a Slack channel that says, recognitions, tagging people, getting people to collaborate and chat about what someone did impacted them can be really, really powerful and really bridge that gap in recognition.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Once we have the needs, then we've got to figure out our next point, right? Is okay, well, we understand some needs, but how do we engage our employees? So if we go to the next slide, we have two slides on engagement. And one is lots of different studies, lots of different big consulting firms, and a common denominator is if you do a program that engages your employees one time or sporadically, it's not as effective as if you engage employees consistently. So that just makes sense. If you again raise your hand, yes, of course we engage employees, but what do you do? Well, we have a barbecue every August. We do that, and then sometimes we have these events and people get involved. Well, what events and how often, and is that consistent? No, if you can set up some consistent type of experiences, the coffee chats that happen every single month, or the engagement that happens, or the recognition, that's a higher level of engagement. Next slide. Okay, so what are we seeing? And this is from, again, large consulting firms and from an analysis, cross-analysis. We have 4 million users, lots of different countries. There are 5 big trends we're seeing in ways to engage employees. So we recognize it's harder to engage employees, post-COVID, hybrid, et cetera. What are we seeing? We're seeing different ways to give feedback. More time spent on one-on-ones, technology areas, pulse checks, more ways to grab feedback. Second thing is in training. So spending more time with managers, supervisors, all the way up the chain. How do we elicit and find out what employees like to do for engagement? Some like happy hours, some like career development. So finding that out, so more training around the career, volunteering, events, fun, always works. And then this idea of employee resource group, and Christina talked about this, but the employee resource group, depending on how big a company you have or how formal this is, right? This could be around diversity, and it's getting lots of different people from different parts of the organization in different generations that are coming together talking about these important issues to the company. That can be diversity, it could be volunteering, it could be all sorts of things. But we're seeing an explosion in getting people connected, whether it's via technology or communities or employee resource groups. And we're seeing ways to get people engaged beyond just the formal diversity committee. We're seeing the Dallas Cowboys team groups, or we're seeing the folks that love to barbecue groups. We're seeing lots more ways and avenues to engage our employees. So I think those are the trends we're seeing. Some successful, some not as successful, but this deliberate movement towards engaging employees. So with that, we're going to move back to our panelists. And this time we'll start with you, Christina. What the companies you work for, working with now, what's working out there with engagement, or what trends are you seeing?
Sure. I'd like to start out with, first of all, intro and onboarding. I think that is so important to make this successful for any organization, because when you're bringing on a new team member, whatever level, whether entry level early in their career or mid and later career in a leadership role, making sure it's clear, introducing them, not only them to those who they need to work with and engage with in their role, helping make those introductions. I've always loved that when people give me the top list of, here are the people you must know right away to be successful or impactful. Here are the most important people in your, maybe it's your objective, your mission that you're focused on in this team. Here are our stars that we always have to work with, right? Make sure and make those introductions, make it easy, make them feel like they're already part of the friends or the circle that's there, rather than them having to go and find these people, hunt them down, literally finding them virtually. Working in a heavily remote world right now, I think this is even more important, because often these team members are not right here in front of us. And so setting them up for success with a solid foundation, understanding their role, the organization, and the North Star that we're all working for, that's where I would begin if someone is coming in. So.
Great.
Pass it to Alicia.
Yes. No, I definitely agree with everything Christina shared. I think when it comes to people that are onboarding, especially when we think about this, the hybrid world that we live in, it's understanding that we have to really be really intentional when we're making those first connections. And so knowing that, we're not going to be bumping into each other necessarily in an office setting or casually walking by somebody's desk, putting that time on their calendar, introducing yourself, making it fun. Maybe do a little bit of an intro video of the team before, and send that out before their first day to like, hey, here's the team, get to know us a little bit better. Setting up those coffee chats for them, helping them to like get to know some folks, maybe high level Q&As of what people's likes or dislikes are, or, their favorite Netflix shows, but just things to make it really easy to get integrated, because that is where we're seeing the disconnect from our hybrid teams. It's yes, everyone's been great, everyone's very lovely. I'm liking my job, but I feel like an external person to the team. Like getting into and being a part of that culture is what's really can be really challenging. And so making sure that they not only understand the culture, but see it, can participate in it, have opportunities to engage with it in different ways, and see the value that it brings with the organization. And so that onboarding piece Christina talked about is so key, because that's when you could talk about your employee resource groups, your values, your mission, events that are coming up, ways that you want to see them get involved, maybe even making sure they attend a meeting or two and making sure that, they are actively participating. Because without that intentionality, we do find that unfortunately our best hires do fall through the cracks, and those intentional pieces help to keep them engaged and really help them find their footing.
Okay, that along those lines, we have another question from the audience, and this goes back a little bit to the disconnect. So the question is, what do you think is the fundamental disconnect between that 90% of executives that say, hey, we're engaging employees, and the 60 or 70% of employees that don't think they're engaged? In other words, what is the key condition that needs to change so both company leaders and employees have the same perspective about that? Where are we missing that intentionality? And maybe any thoughts on where that's dropping off, or how to keep that going?
Yeah, I think high level, I think leaders really do care about engagement. I think they want to see their people participate, be happy, utilize everything the organization is offering them. I think where the things get lost is I think in that middle tier where, the leaders are very passionate about engagement. They see the value, but managers, helping to activate those key goals, they're just so overstacked. And we find managers are usually that middle point where either information flows really well and they got their own cadence, their own rhythm, and they know how to inform their team from their leaders above, or unfortunately it becomes a little bit of a bottleneck and the managers get overwhelmed on top of managing the team, keeping them engaged, thinking about the future, meeting KPIs and goals, and everything else in between. So I find that if we are able to empower our managers a little bit more, helping them to see the relevance of how their team is performing and the engagement piece, I think that would help a lot.
I'll just add a small detail to that. I think that was excellent points and guidance there, but alignment and making sure they actually have access are the things I was thinking of. So aligning, making sure they see where their role aligns with a broader organization or a divisional goal or a specific thing that everyone is going to. Sometimes, especially in really large organizations, they just feel like they're part of a maze and you may never find your way out of it. And that actually leads to the other point I wanted to highlight, which was access, because I feel if you give them access, like maybe there are a bunch of shortcuts to key documents or details that are there for them to succeed with, help them know that they are part of it, understand the impact they're bringing to the team and how they're being recognized for it, make sure they're aware of that, but provide it in a variety of ways, because just like my teaching side, there's different types of learners, visual, those listening to it, and those who like video, those who actively participate, those who are quiet participants. Think of all of those different scenarios and use cases in the workplace and understand that your team might have a variety of all of those. So how will the group actually understand this information, and how can you get them engaged?
Wow, great points all the way around. All right, so we're going to move on from engagement to closely related cousin, recognition, right? So we've got some engagement. Let's take that one little step further. How do we recognize employees? And if we look at, hey, the good old fashioned, thanks, I appreciate you, a long lost art, right? The thank you note. And if we move on, so statistically with the data, what are we seeing? Well, we are seeing, the good news is, we're seeing more frequent and more personal, intentional recognition. And where are we seeing these? Now, this is, like you pointed out, Alicia, not every company. And it depends on the company, it depends on leadership, depends on numerous stages of the company, et cetera. But generally, we're seeing from the top a recognition that, hey, we need to get the word out that we appreciate our employees. So how do we do that? So we're seeing service markers. What does that mean? Well, traditionally, sales team would be recognized for sales, right? Or you'd be recognized maybe for an anniversary, your second year at the job or fourth year at the job, et cetera. Now we're seeing service markers in outside of sales. So someone's been there 30 days on the job and it's an entry level or plant worker. That's exciting. We see that and we celebrate that. Or we see safety service markers, or we see customer success or satisfaction customer markers. So many different service markers that we're recognizing individual employees, and then we're seeing that broadcast to the team, to the division, to the company in order to get the word out there. The other thing is birthdays and anniversaries, but we're seeing them go back to technology, company like Advantage Club, that automates this, whether it's in Slack or Teams or simply on your mobile device. We see automated birthdays, automated anniversaries, automated information to the manager, ability to do wish lists and proactively send a note to an upcoming birthday for a colleague. Those, we're seeing a much more emphasis on that, making people feel comfortable, and not just at the year mark, could be the 6-month mark or the 90-day mark. Then we're seeing contests. And again, outside of the normal contests around, hey, revenue or sales, we're seeing volunteering contests or contests for one another when these employee groups. So the baking contest or costumes, et cetera, but more fun, more activities, more relatable contests, another way to recognize an employee. Then we go on to learning and achievement. And we could spend a lot of time here, but learning and achievement is not only giving more ways to learn, to create opportunities to be better at my job and possibly other career jobs, but certifications or milestones that we can not only say, hey, now we've hit this certification, and we celebrate it with the group, the division, the team, the company. And then finally, leaderboards. And again, leaderboards beyond just the revenue, beyond just the promotion. What are other ways we can recognize some of our employees? And some of these get really fun. We just had one. We were down in, this is a California company, and they have a leaderboard, and the leaderboard has to do with if you have so many good reports from your customers. They have a manager throw a pie at your manager contest, and there's actual leaderboards related to who's going to get how many pies, and then we videotape the whole thing. So what are ways we can grab our culture at our organization, celebrate it more, and provide authentic recognition, but provide more of it and more personal? So those are the trends. Now, with that said, we saw the stats. Not many companies are doing this very, very well, right? So we're all getting our bearings. We're all figuring out what's working and what's not working. So I'm going to go back to Alicia to kick us off on this one. Hey, what is working in terms of recognition, either companies you've been with, you're working with now, or just general trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I think when it comes to recognition, I think the biggest thing we have to recognize is that it can come in many different shapes and forms. So usually when we think about recognition, we may want to, at the end of a team meeting, recognize people, give them a gift card, a card, things of that nature. But sometimes that might make individuals feel uncomfortable. They might be a little bit more introverted, and they actually might prefer a really well written email or no one-to-one versus a group setting. So I think it's getting first a sense of how does your team members, really appreciate recognition and what's meaningful for them. Now, if you have a very large team, of course, that could be quite tricky to navigate if your team is quite large. But I think finding from your leads or from others in the group of what they like, and you get those insights from those social events and things of that nature, you can really make recognition really special. And so what I found is that, or what we're seeing with our clients, is that they want to really have the time to be personalized. They don't want to do something generic for everybody, just to make that person actually feel special. And then also know that the recognition is great, and also, what does this mean for their job? How are we tying that back to their role, their day to day? Do we want to give them a special project? Do we want to, give them, pivot them onto another team, or give them an opportunity to even stretch those goals bigger? So I think there's the immediate appreciation of the recognition, and then automatically our employees' brains goes, okay, great, what next? So really being able to help them see always a little bit of that bigger picture of, we're really proud of you. We're really glad of the work you're doing. Keep up the good work. And also come review time or bonus time, we want to talk about your compensation, or we want to talk about you taking more of a lead role. So recognition is key into not only of the moment, but also how it ties into the bigger picture, and also seeing how others are seeing the recognition of this person as well. Because, if we see our colleagues getting recognized, we want to be mindful that, hopefully that also incentivizes them or gives them a boost to say, okay, you know what, I want to try a little bit harder. I want to make sure that I'm also getting recognized for my efforts as well. And that will kind of spin into its own little ether of opportunity. So as long as we're doing it consistently, and we're really trying to take the time to be intentional and individualized as much as possible, you can really create powerful recognition moments that really cycle into how people show up for work and perform in their role.
Great. Christina?
After that superstar answer, mine's going to sound so small. So I think some of mine are probably a little more simple, but things I've reflected upon over different environments as well as organizations. First of all, I would say it's social. So make sure you understand the vibe or the feel of your organization. Having worked with and in such a mix, some are far more conservative and don't share very much. People are a little more guarded, where others want to party all the time and they want it to be loud, in person, vocal, and everyone is discussing it live at the same time, even if we were distributed around the globe. So know your organization and what will actually work there. But a few ideas I give after giving that little preface there at the very beginning is think of the diversity of ways you can actually recognize people around the globe that really matters to them. Somewhere in one area, it might be calling them out in the meeting. So just immediate is simple. That's something you can do as a manager, leader, up to the executive level. This could be your team meeting. This could be organization up at the next skip level, or it could be even at a divisional meeting. If you're in a larger org that has something like that, maybe they have monthly or quarterly meetings, even if it's at the very end of it, a shout out, a call out to people who've been recognized. And they don't have to go into detail, but just calling their name out and recognizing them in a larger setting, even if it is just a slide that's up there for 15 seconds and calling it out when that meeting is taking place. That person might or might not be there live and in person, but it is calling them out, having the recognition. And again, depending on their preference or style, it is being noticed by the different orgs. Also making sure that another way you can be creative is being innovative. Like maybe it's just an intro to someone. Maybe you're offering to introduce them to have 15 minutes with a senior leader in your organization. You might not have a budget to give them a monetary gift. Maybe you can give them time instead. Maybe you can give them extra office hours. As a leader too, maybe that's something you can offer to your organization, just to give another idea. You might not have a budget, but maybe you could do something like having open office hours on non-work topics necessarily, but maybe it's more career sort of things that you want to talk and anything. However, you might have that flexibility, and whatever works for your culture, use your judgment, use your logic, and what works the best for you. hopefully that's helpful.
Great insight from both of you. Okay, we do have a couple questions from the group here. First is, this goes back to this idea of recognition and communication. Is there some general principles of formal business communication, or should we rely on indirect communication for the engagement and recognition? So that is the question. We'll go to Christina and then Alicia. I think the premise of the question is, how much do we rely on the company for this? How much is individual? And any best practices regarding internal communications?
I would say take charge as that leader, or whether you're at the leader, director, way up at the top, whatever role you might be in the different size of your company, take the initiative to call it out. So whether you're in your team meeting and you can note it on your minutes or notes that you have there, a presentation, sending it up, if there's an internal board that you use, whatever that might be, share it there, whether it's Slack or a web page. And of course, I think I'm thinking digital, especially because I've worked in such globally distributed settings in the last few years, even more so. So think of ways that anyone will see it at any time. That's why I'm thinking digital and going simple that way, because that will both bring it out for the different types of people who appreciate it different ways. And that way anyone will see it who has access. So as long as maybe they're in your group, they're in your community or your channel, they will be aware of that call out. Maybe you put it as a tag at the top of a channel, or you can pin things. Get creative. And I would say take charge as the one in charge of the group or that team that you're trying to inspire. Pass it to Alicia. What do you think?
Yes. No, I plus one to everything Christina shared. I think it's important to recognize that this is where leaders have to really activate and mobilize in their role. The organization on a whole, they might provide a platform or, tools that you can use, but if you're not using them, if you're not engaging with them, if the team isn't seeing you utilize them, then they're not just good. They're not going to be good avenues of usage to see the advantages of it. So, learn the tools that you have, see how you can individualize, make it unique, add your flair to it, and really lean into what Christina said of your team's culture. We have microcultures in our organizations as well, and so lean into that. Maybe your team really loves, summertime, like barbecues and different things like that, and you want to do something that's on theme. Do that because it's special to your team and they're going to appreciate that so much more than, again, something that's just a little bit more generic. So leaders, take that time, really lean in on the tools that you have and how you can utilize them to make these moments really special.
That's great. I will add, we talked earlier about employee resource groups, and those are company led, some of the time, where they say, hey, these are a couple of things that we know are globally or in this particular environment. This is a group that a lot of employees engage in. But we have been seeing more of these people creating their own employee resource groups. So we have a client down in Arizona, a woman, she's not even a manager, individual contributor, but said, hey, this organization needs a bird watching group. And right next to the diversity committee is the bird watching committee. And it's great. And they actually have, I think it's the fastest growing committee. And this is, a company of 5,000 plus. So take the initiative, hey, we're all dying. We don't get enough one-on-one with other people in this crazy digital world we're living in. So if you've got a way to connect, raise your hand. I think that's a great way to go. Okay, next slide. Thank you. All right. So why are we doing this, right? Well, number one, all of us that are interested in this subject here today, we're preaching to the choir, right? We want to work in an organization that we like working for. We want to connect with our employees. Makes us more productive. Makes us want to come to work more. Makes us like the mission of the organization more. But the other side of this is, hey, for organizations at the very top, at the board level, at the CEO level, there's a return on investment for doing this. It's not just nice to do. it really impacts the bottom line. And how does it do this? Well, the higher productivity, the lower employee turnover, higher revenue per employee, lower absenteeism. And you can see there's data behind each and every one of these. So increasing employee engagement, positive manner, recognition, needs, there is a direct correlation between return on investment for your organization. Next slide. So this is where we're wrapping up. We've got about 4 more minutes here with the rest of the group and our audience. We're going to close with this idea from Doug Conant, Campbell Soup and CEO from many different organizations, said, hey, win the marketplace, you first must win the workplace. So that's where we need to start. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to our panelists, and we're going to do closing thoughts for everyone as we part here. We've covered employee needs, a little bit of training, recognition, and engagement. Any parting thoughts? And we'll start with Alicia. We'll go back to Christina on for this incredibly important topic that we're discussing today.
Yes, no, this has just been a wonderful conversation. And I think, the quote speaks so true to the theme and the importance of this conversation is that you have to recognize that your employees are your extension to your marketplace, to your customers, to your clients. And so if you can make them happy, if you can get them engaged, if you can make them feel like their work is more than just clocking in and clocking out, that's going to be seen and felt by your clients. That's going to, really be appreciated. And that's going to differentiate you between your competitors in the marketplace. And that's what's really going to make you stand out. And so when you think about it that way, that, your bottom line could be a direct reflection of what's going on in the inner workings of your organization, it should really make you think on how can we really use this asset and really rejuvenate this asset to really make it stand out and make it a staple of how we show up and how we deliver our product or service.
Great. Christina.
I would summarize it with a few thoughts, like it's not a one size, one solution sort of thing. You have to understand your organization, the environment, and your objectives that you're working towards. Make sure you're really adjusting on a constant basis. And with that, remember flexibility. Flexibility from what you offer your teams, how they communicate, understanding, are they the type that would rather do this in chat and everything? How do you engage those that are in person, those that are remote, those that are on the other side of the world, as well as the different generations. We all have different preferences depending on maybe our personality, our experiences, and what we've been exposed to. Listen to that, watch where that goes, and evolve over time, because I think we'd be surprised how many times you can actually make your employees really feel like they are included and being listened to, although they might not know that they really were being recognized in the first place. But when you start calling out things like you're giving them flexibility, you're giving them a new project of their choice, there's different ways that you can recognize and reward them and make this experience the winning one that hopefully leads to the best retention possible.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you all. As a reminder, if you didn't get your question answered today or want further specific questions, Alicia, Christina have been kind enough to allow, you will receive an email. You can link to their individual profile. And we have one of our senior consultants that can also talk through your individual company and what we're seeing with like-sized businesses, practical tips. So thank you all for joining today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And let's take what we've learned back to our respective organizations. Thank you.